Watching the Georgia Tech game, watching Georgia Tech beat up FSU, run down their throat, got me thinking. Georgia Tech could be ranked by the end of the year, right? They've already got a top 10 win now. Obviously, it's preseason rankings, and the value of certain wins change as the year goes on. But Georgia may end up playing a top ranked, or not top ranked, but a ranked Georgia Tech at the end of the year. And then you look at the schedule, you know that in the preseason top 25, Georgia's got to play 5 of those teams, right? And 3 of them being in the top 6, all on the road, right? It's a tough schedule for Georgia, in addition to the Tennessee and the Clemson matchup. But what if Georgia Tech's ranked by the end of the year? What if some other teams are ranked by the end of the year? By my math and by me just looking at these schedules and the possibilities, I think that Georgia can end up playing 8 ranked teams in 2024, right? That doesn't happen often. I did a lot of digging. I couldn't find many examples. There was, I think, an Illinois team in the 90s or some team in the 90s that had played 8 ranked teams. Florida, this year, their preseason schedule has 8 ranked teams on it. That can obviously change, and maybe Georgia doesn't end up playing 8 ranked teams, and maybe Georgia doesn't end up playing 3 top 6 teams the way it all falls down. But it is possible that we see an unprecedented thing, and that is Georgia playing 8 ranked teams. Right? This is ridiculous. It's not something that Georgia's had to deal with, especially not with the divisions. Well, new SEC, right? The new SEC has got all sorts of weird ticks, right? I don't know if you saw the press release that we put out, Dawg post about the SEC and their new policies for tiebreakers, right? Those rules are all weird. We live in a new college football world, and the Dogs have an already known gauntlet, but I think this gauntlet could be even tougher than people actually think. I'm about to dive into it. There's 3 teams in addition to the 5 ranked ones that are already on Georgia's schedule that I think can be ranked by the end of the year. Kentucky, Auburn, and Georgia Tech, and I'm going to go through their schedules, talk about that. What does it mean for Georgia as well? Ryan Kelly from Dawg Post here. Hey, make sure you're checking out our newsletter. It's linked down below, the newsletter for dawgpost.com. Look, we appreciate you. We appreciate you watching on here. It's obviously a big part of what we do. Another big part of what we do is over on dawgpost.com, and that's the written reporting, right? There's some stuff on there. There's honestly more on the website than there is on the YouTube, right? You get our personalities on here, but in written form, there's a little bit more, and there's a little bit more inside stuff, so please check that out. We've been pumping out a lot of content this last week. We plan on pumping out a lot of content this season and upping our game, right? You want to always be better than last. You want to get, what did Carson Beck say in that standard video recently? He said, I want to be 1% better every single day. That's what we're trying to do at Dawg Posts and bringing you content. So make sure you're checking out our newsletter. I appreciate you looking at that with the link down below. So, the first team that is not ranked in the preseason that I think could be ranked by the time that Georgia plays them is the Kentucky Wildcats, right? Georgia plays them. That's their 3rd opponent this year. They got to deal with Clemson. They got to deal with Tennessee Tech. And then they go on the road to play the Kentucky Wildcats. Well, Kentucky was not ranked, but they were among the teams receiving votes, right? So they're kind of a borderline top 25 team, probably in the top 40, top 35-ish, right? I'd have to go to the rankings and count it out to see what they're actually ranked, but it's close, right? Well, you blow out Southern Miss. That's their first game. 7:45 home game against Southern Miss, and then they've got a home game against South Carolina. You won that pretty convincingly, too. And, I mean, all of a sudden, a couple teams at the bottom of the top 25 lose some games. Kentucky may be ranked by week 3. It's totally possible. If they look good, new look offense with Brock Vandagriff at quarterback, things are looking different for a Kentucky team that has been borderline ranked or has been ranked and has been a competitive football team and has been sometimes a tough out for Georgia, right? And I think that Mike Stoops has done a really good job, and they hit the transfer portal and tried to make that team better, right? They made that effort. They did that the year prior when they went out and got Devin Leary. Well, that experiment didn't work. Now they're experimenting with Brock Vandagriff. They go out, they try to help their defense. They get a Jamon Dumas-Johnson from Georgia, right? They obviously lose some talent. You lose your star running back, Ray Davis, but this is a Kentucky offense that I think will surprise a little bit of people. They've got a receiver that's one of my sleeper receivers for a guy that's just going to have an absolutely huge year. Barryon Brown, I believe. If he hasn't changed his number, he wears number 7. Go watch that tape against Clemson. And honestly, just go watch that tape against Clemson. Kentucky retains a lot, and they add some positive things to this offense. I just think this is a team that could be ranked. I'm not saying it's going to be a team that Georgia really, really struggles with. I think going up to Kentucky, obviously night, it'll be a solid environment up there. I've been to Kroger Stadium before. It was freezing the last time I went there. 2 years ago, 2022. I think it was literally freezing and windy, and that was an environment that was tough for Georgia. Well, it's not going to be that cold this time. And Georgia's a significantly better team, so I don't think they struggle. But again, I do think that Kentucky could be ranked by the time they play. The next one has a little bit better of a chance of being ranked by the time Georgia plays, and part of that is because they've got some more games on their schedule to maybe be undefeated or maybe be a one-loss team by the time they get there, and more cards will fall by the time we get to this game. But that's the Auburn Tigers. Don't sleep on Auburn. I'm not saying don't sleep on Auburn as a playoff team. I don't think Auburn is a playoff team. I don't think Kentucky's a playoff team. And I don't think unless Georgia Tech just starts rattling off wins and going through the ACC, I don't feel that way about the Yellow Jackets either. But here's the thing with Auburn. Returning quarterback, another year in the regime of Hugh Freeze. Year 2 usually goes better than year 1 for new head coaches. I think they have one of the best running backs in the country, and they've got some good running back depth as well. When you talk about Jarquez Hunter and what they have behind him, I think that they got better at receiver over the offseason, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think this is a better Auburn football team. This is an Auburn team that one week can struggle with a non-Power 5 team, and the next week they could be competing with Alabama or Georgia and almost winning in the final minutes, right? That's how it goes with Auburn. Well, you look at it this year. Alabama A&M week 1, that's a win. Versus California week 2, you think that's a win at home. Right? It was a little bit different out there last year. Versus New Mexico home, you'd think that's a win. Versus Arkansas home, I think that Auburn's a better football team than Arkansas. So right there off the bat, 4-0, in my opinion. And then at home against a probably ranked, currently ranked number 16 Oklahoma team. I mean, Oklahoma's probably a better football team, right? And overall, but when you think about what can happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and maybe this is Oklahoma's welcome to the SEC moment, but my point here being is Auburn is totally a team that can end up being ranked by the end of this, or by the middle of the season. And I think when Georgia has to play them on October 5th, I think they're going to be 4-1 or 5-0, and if they're 5-0 with a ranked win, they're going to be ranked 100%. And here's the other thing that I actually failed to mention at the beginning of me talking about Auburn was that along with Kentucky, they were already receiving votes. So this is not a team that's like drastically out of the rankings. This is a team that is already thought of as a borderline top 25 football team. So then that's when you move on to Georgia Tech. We just watched Georgia Tech. I watched them yesterday. They ran all over Florida State. Now, I knew and I wrote that I thought Florida State was going to be noticeably worse than last year, a team that was overrated last year and a team that is going to be even worse this season. Well, they weren't that good, right? And Georgia Tech's front seven looked better. Georgia Tech's running game looked better. Haynes King looked like a better quarterback than DJU, and he played into the offense that Georgia Tech runs really well. Well, you look at Georgia Tech's schedule. They just beat top, quote-unquote top 10 Florida State. I don't think this is one of the 10 best teams in the country. These rankings are changing, but they beat a Florida State team that's going to be better than most of the teams that they play. When I go through it, I think Georgia Tech will beat Georgia State. I think they'll beat Syracuse. I think VMI, I don't even know who VMI is, but I think they're going to beat them at Louisville. I think Georgia Tech probably wins that game. Versus Duke, Georgia Tech probably wins that game. At North Carolina, I don't know. Let's say they lose that game. Let's say they lose to Notre Dame the next week. Let's say they lose at Virginia Tech the next week. And then they beat it's the end of the schedule for Georgia Tech, but they're going to be ranked through, I believe, October 12th. Georgia Tech's going to be ranked after this weekend, and I think through October 12th, they're definitely going to be ranked. But then the end of the season is when you run into some trouble, right? Their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games is really tough. Notre Dame, top 10 preseason team. At Virginia Tech, I think a tough ACC team this year. Versus Miami. I don't know what to make of Miami yet. I don't know what to make of all of these quarterbacks transferring around. The quarterbacks that are not the top tier ones, not the Dylan Gabriels, right, or the Quinn Ewers types of players. I'm talking about the Cam Wards, the DJUs, that level of transfer quarterback. I don't know how much that really benefits a team. You got to play Miami, NC State, preseason ranked teams. Let's say Georgia Tech splits those 4 games. We're talking about a 2-loss team, maybe a 3-loss team with a ranked win. That's a team that's probably ranked at the end of the year, is it not? So I do think it's totally possible that Georgia. This is a different Georgia Tech. I think Georgia can end up playing 8 ranked teams. Right, I just talked about the 3 that I think could be ranked in addition to Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, Clemson, Tennessee. You look at it. This is an unprecedented can't finish. Unprecedented gauntlet for the Dogs. Thanks for watching.